In this episode, you'll learn all about subject pronouns and object pronouns so that you'll know the difference between you and me and you and I. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and I. Or is it with Reza and me? You'll find out in this episode.
Hi, it is I, or it is me, Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's wonderful to see you again and to be podcasting with you. And I'm really looking forward to diving into a bit of grammar with you this episode and looking at these pronouns. Why are we speaking about this grammar point today? Well, we got a lovely message from Dantes from Brazil, who is currently living in Canada.
Hi Reza, hi Craig, I'm Dantes, I'm from Brazil, but I have been living in Canada for 3 months now, and I have been listening to your podcast since then, and it's been very useful to me. However, I always get confused about if I say you and me, you and I, me and you. I'm not sure when I should use those words. So if you can help me with that, I will appreciate it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Dantes, thank you very much for your lovely message. Wasn't that lovely pronunciation, Reza?
It was really, really good pronunciation. And there were a few words you said, Dantes, which had even a Canadian accent, I thought. You're beginning to get it slowly.
Yeah, so well done on the message. Absolutely fantastic. I don't think I heard anything that I want to correct or suggest for improvement. That was absolutely wonderful.
I want to be the party pooper.
Oh, you noticed something that I didn't.
Yes, something which, is it wrong? I would say technically, yeah, but a native speaker might even say it, but they shouldn't. You said that the podcasts were useful to me, but really it should be useful for me. Yeah, would you agree? Useful for somebody.
Yeah, that's true. I would agree with that.
But hey, that's no big deal. It was a fantastic audio message. Thanks a lot, Dantes.
So to address your question, Dantes, to look at your question and give you some help with that, let's go back to basics, shall we? Let's go right back to the beginning and look at pronouns. So we can group pronouns in two groups, the subject pronouns and the object pronouns. Reza, what are the subject pronouns?
So the subject pronouns, by the way, let me just clarify. When we say subject, we mean, in Spanish, it would be el sujeto, right? We're not talking about subjects like mathematics and chemistry, right? that kind of subject. And when we say object, we don't mean objeto. No. When we say object, that's complemento in Spanish, right? Let's just clarify that. Okay. The subject pronouns then, first of all, it's probably easier if you divide it up in your mind as singular and plural. Yeah, one person or more than one person. And another way you can divide it, which is the traditional way in grammar books, is the first, the second, and the third person. So when I speak, I am obviously the first person I think of. I. But if it was I and another person, then it would be we, right? So the plural of I is we. So I is the first person, singular, and we is the first person because it includes I and another person or more. And then you've got the second person, you. So when I speak to you, there's just the two of us. Obviously, I think of me first. I'm number one. And I think of you second. You're number two, right? You're the second person.
I'm always number two.
Yeah, number two.
Story of my life.
And just to confuse learners of English, as you probably know by now, the word you is both singular and plural. So if you're a Spanish speaker, yes, you know that you is two And it's also vosotros or vosotras. Or if you want to be polite, it could be usted and ustedes. So all of those words in English, we just got one. You. You second person singular and you second person plural. And then the third person singular, he, she, it. So think about it. If I'm talking to you, I'm number one, you're number two, but we're talking about another person, well, that other person is number three. So the other person we're talking about, not I, not you, is he or she. Or it could be a thing, maybe not a person, then it would be it. So the third person singular is he, she, and it. And the third person plural subject is they. So they is the plural version of he or she or it. They is for people or for things. Is that clear, do you think, Craig, more or less?
Yep. I think that's very clear. By the way, if it's a little difficult to follow these explanations, you can see everything written in the show notes. Go to inglespodcast.com/431 and you'll be able to see these words written in the notes. Let's move on to object pronouns. So if you think of a verb, let's think of the verb love, to love, for example. As Reza said, the subject pronoun I love. Well, who do you love? If I love you, then you is the object pronoun. And if you love me, you would be the subject pronoun, me would be the object pronoun. So we have object pronouns, and they are me, or us, if it's plural, you, which doesn't change, it's you and you, for plural and singular, and the third person would be him, her, or it for singular, and them for plural. So again, me and us, you and you, him, her, it, or them for plural. And as you know, the subject, verb, object order in English is very, very strict. We like to keep it that way. Subject, verb, object. I love you is correct, but me love you is not correct. Maybe I love me if you love yourself, but not me love you.
Or she loves me, that's correct. She, the subject pronoun, loves me, the object pronoun. You can't say she loves I, right? Because I is the subject. You got to say me. She loves me.
So those are the basics, Dantes. So let's go a little further. Let's take it one step further and use two subjects before the verb. You and I, Reza, you and I do the podcast together. So you and I are both subjects, aren't they? We have two subjects there, you and I. Or we could say we. We do the podcast together.
So what Craig just said is perfectly correct. However, you can also say you and me. So instead of you and I, you and me do the podcast together. And in this case, the words you and me are both subjects in the sentence. But hold on, stop your saying. I'm confused now. Didn't Reza and Craig just say a minute ago that I is the subject pronoun and me is the object pronoun?
We said that, didn't we?
We said that. That's the rule. But already we've come across exceptions to the rule. There are plenty. So you can say you and I, of course. But you know what? In modern English, it's actually more common to say you and me than you and I. They're both correct. But really, you and I, you could say is more correct. But people prefer to say you and me these days. Strange, but true.
It is strange. Now, one reason why it's maybe accepted is because you have two subject pronouns together, you and me. And it's obviously not common, not correct to just use me. So you cannot say me do the podcast every week. When there are two subjects, you and me, then that is quite acceptable English. Another example, I could say that Reza and I love podcasting because Reza is a subject, comes before the verb, and I love. is also the subject. Reza and I love podcasting.
But Craig could also say, Reza and me love podcasting. Or he could say, Reza and me will have a pint of lager. Or he could say, Reza and I will have a pint of lager. Reza and me, Reza and I, as we've just explained, they're both correct. But you'll find in modern English, people tend to say more Reza and me, or you and me, or Mary and me, etc.
So try to remember that unless me is on its own, use and me, when you'll probably be okay. That's acceptable.
Another example could be you and I, in other words, we, are learning about English grammar. Craig, would it be correct there to say you and me?
Yep, that would be acceptable. You and me are learning about English grammar. And that's because the pronouns you, I, me are all subject pronouns. Now let's look at an example where the pronouns are object pronouns. If I say, for example, this podcast will help you and me to speak better English, instead of using we can use us. Will help us to speak better English.
Because there you and me's object, right?
Yep.
Not subject.
Exactly.
Craig, what about if we've got pronouns with prepositions? What happens then?
Well, after prepositions, and as you know, you get many prepositions in phrasal verbs, we also use object pronouns after those, after prepositions. For example, it's really important to her, or it's really important to me, or is it really important to you? Can you think of another example?
Can the dog go with you? Or look at me? Or the chocolate is for us.
It's for you and me. The chocolate is for you and me. So if you want some chocolate, get in touch with Reza and me for some chocolate.
Or let's use Dan T's example from earlier. Do you remember the one I slightly corrected? She said useful to me, but she should have said that the podcasts were useful for me.
Yep.
So Dan T's has an example as well.
Okay, let's move on to test you a little bit and get you to choose pronouns. Imagine a situation where you're on holiday in the UK, you're walking along with your friends, and you would like a picture. You want somebody to take a picture of you and your friends, and you stop an English person in the street. You have your mobile phone in your hand and you say, "Excuse me, can you take a picture of my friends and me, or can you take a picture of my friends and I?" What do you think, Reza?
I think it's better to say my friends and me.
That's what I would say. Absolutely. Yeah. My friends and I sounds too formal to me.
Yes, not only that, but technically it doesn't really follow the rules if you say and I, because we said with a preposition, so of my friends, and me with a preposition, it really should be the object for me. However, some people do say my friends and I, they do, but I find that it may be people that are trying to overcompensate. They think, oh, I want to sound polite, so I'm not going to say me, I'm going to say I. But by overcompensating, they've actually done it wrong now, because it's supposed to be me with a preposition, not I.
Exactly. You think, oh, it's a stranger, I must sound formal. But no, it wouldn't be correct. And just think that you would say, if it's just you by yourself, on your own, can you please take a picture of me? So just remember that. Take a picture of me, or take a picture of my friends and me. Can you think of another example? Another test?
What about this? My friends and I, or my friends and me, are going to the beach. Which one do you prefer?
I think both will be acceptable, but really, to be grammatically correct according to the books, it should be my friends and I are going to the beach. Because if you remove my friends, I am going to the beach. So my friends and I are going to the beach.
Although that's the case that we mentioned earlier, where really most people probably would say my friends and me, although they're being less correct than they could be.
Yeah.
People will definitely say my friends and me as well as my friends and I.
Reza, between you and me, I think we should give another example. Or should I say, between you and I think we should give another example.
Well, both sound familiar. You definitely hear both. But for me, and not for I, for me, between you and me is better because it's following the rule, so to speak, that we mentioned with a preposition, and between is a preposition, use the object form. So I think it's better to say between you and me.
Yeah. We can also use these object pronouns for emphasis when we want to emphasize something. I don't know if you remember the famous scene from Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro when he's looking in the mirror and he says, "Are you talking to me? Huh? Are you talking to me?" And he really emphasizes that object pronoun. Can you think of an example where we might use a pronoun for emphasis?
Yes, well, you can just add the word which doesn't really need to be there. For example, Craig, do you prefer meat or fish?
Me, I prefer fish, definitely.
So the word me there that Craig added wasn't necessary, right? He could have just said, I prefer fish, definitely. That was good enough. But he added the word me for emphasis. But he couldn't say I. He said, do you prefer meat or fish? It's not right to say I. I prefer, no. You have to use the object form. So he has to say me, I prefer. Strangely, even though it's not an object, you have to use the object form if you're adding it for emphasis.
Let's look at another example. Do you remember at the beginning of the podcast, Reza said that you, the pronoun you, is used for singular and plural in English? Well, imagine Reza is with his partner and I want to speak to both of them. I might say you guys. So are you guys ready to leave?
Us? We're ready, but Bob and Kathy are still getting dressed. So in my answer, I said, we're ready, but I preceded it before it with the word us. Now, of course, in Spanish, you would say nosotros, yeah? In English, we got to think, is it the subject? Is it the object? So we're ready, but I want to add the fact that comparing me and my partner to this other couple, Bob and Kathy, so talking just about me and my partner, us, we're ready, but Bob and Kathy are still getting dressed. So the word us merely gives emphasis that I'm talking about me and my partner. So even though it's not really an object, you have to use the object form for emphasis.
I really like fizzy drinks. A fizzy drink, F-I-Z-Z-Y, F-I-Z-Z-Y, drinks like Coca-Cola, Fanta, Sprite or Red Bull. I really like them. What about you, Reza? Do you like fizzy drinks?
Me, I can't stand them myself. So again, I'm beginning with a separate object pronoun before I really answer the question. The real answer is, I can't stand them. But I start by saying, me, I can't stand them. And I've also added another word. Very commonly, we also add the word myself to give even more emphasis. Me, I can't stand them. Myself. That word myself isn't necessary, but it just adds even more emphasis.
And notice the stress, the energy that Reza put on that pronoun me. Me with rising intonation. Me? For example, imagine your child does something really bad. And imagine you have two children. You want to discover which child did the bad thing. You could say, who did that? What would you say, Reza?
Me. Just that.
You could also say, I did.
Right.
Using the verb.
You can't say just I on its own. That's the weird
No,
thing.
you can't say I on its own. I did with the verb or just me. I did it.
When the object pronoun is the answer to a question, even though it isn't necessarily the object, it could be the subject, like Craig said. I did it. But if you just say the one word, then you have to say me. You cannot say I, unless you want to sound like someone from the 19th century. But in modern English, you definitely wouldn't say it, would you?
Or a pirate.
Who did it?
Aye.
But no, in modern English there, we definitely say me.
Aye, me hearty. After we've recorded this podcast, we'll probably have some lunch. But has anyone brought any food?
Us. We've brought some sandwiches.
So there you use the pronoun us as an answer to my question.
And then I added a sentence. What the first answer is using the object pronoun, us. And then when I added a sentence, I had to use the subject version. We've brought some sandwiches.
So we hope this information has helped you, Dantis, although we do realize that some of the things we've said are a bit ambiguous. It's not really completely, absolutely 100% clear and obvious as a grammar rule. And this is shown in many forms of expression. For example, if you go all the way back to Shakespeare in his play The Merchant of Venice, one thing that's said in this play is, all debts are cleared between you and I. Although really, according to the rules or the guides we've just explained, it should be between you and me, shouldn't it?
Should be.
Now imagine you're Shakespeare's teacher in his English class, Reza. Would you correct him on that?
I would have to say Shakespeare, fairly good progress, but could do better.
Could do better, yeah. Write 100 times, Shakespeare. All debts are cleared between you and me. Imagine being Shakespeare's teacher. It'd be a nightmare, wouldn't it? How difficult would that be? And there's another English poet and playwright called Ben Jonson, who wrote in one of his plays the following: Musco has been with my cousin and I all this day. Of course, that really should be with my cousin and me, or with us. So over time, really famous people have not used these pronouns in the way that you see written in many grammar books. And bringing some examples up to the present day, Reza, there's some examples from songs and music, isn't there?
Yes, some very famous artists have used questionable grammar. Lady Gaga has said you and I, and maybe she shouldn't have. Let me read the line from her song. She said something about my cool Nebraska guy. Yeah, something about baby, you and I.
Now, obviously, because songs like to have words that rhyme, that sound the same, guy and I rhymes, they sound the same, but you and me, word me doesn't rhyme with guy. So that's probably why she used it in that song.
Can you think of any other lines, Craig?
There's a song by One Direction that's called You and I. And the verse in the song, the part of the song goes like this. Not even the I'm not going to sing, so don't worry. Not even the gods above can separate the two of us. No, nothing can come between you and I. And of course, because you and I are the objects, it should be you and me. And now it's your turn to practice your English. Why don't you send a voice message to Reza and me? How can they do that, Reza?
Well, we prefer you to send a voice message, but you've got to keep it to, I think, 90 seconds. Is that right, Craig?
That's right.
Yeah, so keep it short. We like it, but keep it short.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Send it to speakpipe.com/Inglespodcast. I guess if you're a bit too shy or you're not quite ready, you could write to us. You could write an email to Craig@Inglespodcast.com or to me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we invite you to visit the Mansion Inglés online store, where you can find some paid courses to help you with your English. The address for that, the website, is store.mansioningles.net. And before we go out the door this week, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. And you too can join our Patreon program for as little as $1.20 per month. That's including the VAT tax. If you do that, you get sent every week the words to everything Reza and I say on the podcast, access to recent transcriptions. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Inglespodcast.
We would like to thank every single person who supports us through Patreon, but we can't. The list is too long and we don't want to take up all your time. But what we will do, as usual, is thank our most recent supporters who've joined us this month. And they are Manuel Prado, Edgar Valandia, Alberto Valverde Conde, Olga Fernandez, Fernando del Cerro, Melissa A. da Horta, Jordi Antolin Carraga, and Anna Criado, who very kindly is giving more than the minimum $1. Thanks very much to all you recent supporters who've joined us.
Yes, thank you very, very much. On next week's episode, thanks to long-time listener of the show, Erasmo, who suggests we speak about pilots, flying, and aviation vocabulary. And Erasmo is an AIRC430, which has two meanings. Because of Erasmo, he likes the podcast, so that's Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig, AIRC430, and also he enjoys flying, so he is an air-caholic up in the air.
True.
Did you see what I did there?
A double air-caholic.
A double air-caholic. So Erasmo, next week, I know you've been waiting, is the episode on flying. Please join us for that. Thank you for listening this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from Reza.
And it's bye-bye from Craig.
And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, please mention this podcast to your friends. The music today is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.